Hi, everyone. Clay. My name is Isabella Lacey. I'm a 24-year-old Mi'kmaq woman, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm very proud to be able to give my second ever land acknowledgement to you all and to everyone at home watching. This is the last in a series of incredible webinars that I've loved watching, and I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone at Quadrangle NL, the CBRC, the AIDS Committee of Newfoundland and Labrador, and anyone who has had a hand in this project for the amazing work that has been done throughout these videos. As someone who grew up in central Newfoundland, I found my access to sexual knowledge incredibly limited. Even more limited was my queer sexual knowledge. Anything that was taught to me in school certainly wasn't done through an intersectional lens. If I wanted to know something, I'd have to find out all by myself, usually through the internet. I'm very glad and relieved that queer youth can now access webinars such as this instead of whatever I was watching in 2006. It's a cliche, but knowledge is power. And at times as these, queer people need that knowledge and a sense of community, and for topics that weren't talked about growing up to be destigmatized and legitimized so that we can all be informed, safe, and smart. To continue, discussing sexual health with an intersectional lens is paramount in these conversations. Transgender sexual health, sex worker health, POC sexual health, just to name a few, all need to be at the forefront of these conversations, because if we're not helping all of us, we're helping none of us. Without further ado, I'd like to move into acknowledging the land that we've gathered on today, even if we've gathered virtually. The island known now as Newfoundland is the ancestral unceded territory of the Beothuk people and Mi'kmaq people. I would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunasiavut and Nunatakavut and the Innu of Nitassinan as the original people of Labrador. It is mutual respect, knowledge, and celebration of culture that bring us all closer together. And I take joy in that while acknowledging that there is still much work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella. That's beautiful, beautiful land acknowledgement. Thank you everyone for being here. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Yohei. I use he, him. Charlie and I, we work for the Community-Based Research Center, CBRC. And the Community-Based Research Center promotes the health of 2S LGBTQ+ people through research and intervention development. And I would also like to talk about the program Pivot. Pivot is a community health leadership program for 2S LGBTQ people. And throughout Pivot, participants gain the health literacy, practical skills, and community networks needed to identify and collectively respond to the systemic and structural challenges impacting their health and that of their peers. And this Uncovered Sex at the Kitchen series is the intervention piece that the participants of the last Pivot came up with. The Pivot initially was 4-day in-person workshop, but unfortunately this pandemic happened and we went into the online platform. And therefore our Uncovered Sex at the Kitchen series also is this webinar platform. However, we have had so many wonderful speakers so far. This is the last episode of Uncovered Sex at the Kitchen Table, which it's a little bit sad, but also Jen, Charlie, myself, we are feeling a lot of accomplishment. So having said that, I would like to now welcome back Charlie to talk about Quadrangle NL.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Yohei, for that. And thank you, Isabella, for that amazing land acknowledgement. Sorry that no one can see me. For some reason, I don't know why, but it likes to, at times, just not want my camera to work. Like Yohei mentioned, I'm also part of CBRC. We are the regional support individuals for Newfoundland and Labrador. But I'm also the executive director of Quadrangle NL, which is a new charity working towards a community center for Newfoundland and Labrador. And we partnered with CBRC on this project known as Pivot, which then turned into our lovely webinar series. And as Yohei mentioned, and I'm sure Jen will as well, it's really sad that this is our last episode, but it's also really rewarding that we've come this far. We've had over 23 speakers, I believe it is, individuals doing our land acknowledgement, wonderful ASL interpreters. So it's been a really great project and a great process. And hopefully we'll turn this webinar series more into a community discussion later on as the months progress. But with that, I'm all done talking about myself and Quad, and I'll hand it over to Jen, and myself and Yohei will disappear, and we'll see you close to the end of the evening.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Yohei. I'm just gonna share a short little presentation really quick. 1 second. Okay, so thanks for being here, everybody. Like they both just said, I'm super thrilled that this is coming to an end, although I am a little bit sad. But it has been a wonderful, wonderful experience this past year. Actually, yesterday at work, I work with Kim, but yesterday at work, we had to reflect on like where we were this time last year. And I was talking about how I actually started this training, and this is kind of, we were shifting into the online portion of it, but it's wild to like 1 year later to be clearing this up. It's a really nice like harmony, you know, in some ways. And it has been wonderful meeting so many awesome people. The conversations have been awesome. And I actually would recommend watching the recordings because they are all available online. Maybe Charlie or Yohei could post the links. It has been very funny to go back and rewatch myself. I often cringe. So anyway, I hope you enjoy, but thanks for being here, everybody. So a little bit about privacy. Because you are, if you participate in the chat, please know that this is going to be recorded and it will be publicized for free access. So if you don't want to be identified, maybe keep your camera off, your mic muted. You can change your display name. So if you want to put it as like, just like a letter or whatever it is you want, please just know that, you know, your privacy may or may not be compromised there. If you do have more questions, you can visit zoom.us/privacy, or you can reach out to Charlie or Yohei if you have more questions. Yeah. So I think they already talked a little bit about what the project is, but basically just really short, we wanted a fun platform to have cool conversations, and that's pretty much it. We literally just wanted to bring together people and make conversations public that were happening behind closed doors to, like Isabella said, to destigmatize and to give visibility to this really important, these really important topics. And it honestly has been a lot of fun. Okay, thank you, Charlie, for posting that. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So I would like to introduce who we have here today. So we have Kim Offspring, we have Pepper, and we have Ophelia Ravencroft. I'm gonna let them maybe introduce themselves, tell us who they are a little bit. Yeah, so maybe we'll start with Kim. Maybe Kim, tell us why you're here today, what you do, what informs your perspective here today in this room. And then maybe Pepper,
sure.
and Ophelia.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks so much to the Quad and CBRC for inviting me here. I'm really excited. So I guess to start with, my background in education is in social work. So I'm currently a social worker. I'm in the position of 2S LGBTQIA+ services coordinator with YWCA St. John's. I've worked with a variety of different community organizations over the past few years. Community is definitely where my heart is. I've worked with organizations like St. John's Women's Center. I've done multiple positions with YWCA, worked with Camp Eclipse, things like that. And I'm also the co-founder of Quiver Club and A-Space, which is a supportive group for asexual and or aromantic identified folks. So that's something that I've started as well over the years. But I think that's me in a nutshell. I'm definitely informed by intersectional practice, and I take an anti-oppressive lens to everything that I do. So that's me.
Thanks, Kim. Pepper, maybe then Ophelia?
Sure. So I go by Pepper. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm from here. I just opened a shop downtown, which is kind of why I'm here today. Me and my friend opened it just so that our community could have somewhere to buy you know, safer products, more inclusive products, learn about access to programs being offered, and just like generally to have a space that people in the community can come together and maybe organize or just party. I don't know, just we wanted something that isn't here before, because it seems like a lot is lacking here that exists in bigger cities. Basically, I went to university in BC a couple of years ago, and that's when I really started to learn about activism and different things that are now just seem like super obvious to me, but you know, colonialism and Indigenous rights and feminism, and there's a lot of like actions out there, and just mostly participating in different frontline work, and just in school trying to focus on that.
Awesome. Very cool. Ophelia?
Hey, so yeah, the captions just called me Ophelia Ravencroft, which I think I'm gonna adopt as an unofficial name. I mean, it's not much sillier than this one. I swear I had remarks prepared for large portions of this, but my computer and virtually everything around me just sort of blew up immediately before coming in here, so I'm running on fumes here, and I apologize. It was a pleasure to have, I believe it was Charlie who reached out a number of months ago and mentioned that you know, the CBRC and the Quad were going to be running this video series, and would I be interested in speaking on some of these topics. And it's a pleasure. I've been active for a number of years in local feminist circles, particularly around issues of sex worker and trans rights. I've pushed hard for better discourse, more education, more acceptance and inclusivity, particularly of sex workers locally. And that's which has been a great passion of mine for quite some time. This was something I tried to bring into the municipal election in the past fall, which I'll be trying to do in the next municipal election as well. Just trying to get these conversations going in as many different levels as we can to make the city as good and inclusive and positive as it can be. And I'm just watching whether the captions are getting this or not. I know I talk too fast, but it's a question of whether the computer can come up with me too. That's pretty much what I've got to say for now. I think the rest of my reasons for being here will boil out during this, I'm sure.
Cool. Okay. I'm wondering, so y'all touched a little bit about what you do and where you involve your activism, but I'm wondering why. What made you get involved in activism or into this LGBTQIA health activism to begin with? What inspired you to get involved? Maybe same order, or whoever feels inspired to go first.
For me, I just, in high school, I had a lot of gay friends. I didn't unpack my own internalized homophobia until much later, but I always had gay friends. And I mean, just knowing them and like hearing about their struggles, obviously, I wanted to help them out. But one of my friends had someone really important to them pass away during that time. And it was the first time I was really aware of mental health struggles and depression, how that affects, I mean, everybody, but also people who are Two-Spirit LGBT plus. And it just made me aware of, I don't know, injustices and like where they come from, and just was really upsetting. So made me angry, and now I want to change things.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah, I think that's, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, that's a very relatable statement about feeling angry about things and wanting to make change. I think a very key moment that stands out to me as kind of kickstarting this drive for advocacy and activism is, well, I grew up with a mom with multiple disabilities, and I remember helping my dad write an advocacy letter at like 12 years old or something to some government official. I don't remember what exactly it was for, but I just remember always kind of having some sort of drive in me to help others in some sort of way, or make the community better for other people. And I think a lot of the things that I am passionate about are things that I've either experienced myself or those close to me have experienced. So I think that's where a lot of that drive comes from, whether it's, you know, mental health, around sexuality, or, you know, experiences of racism or discrimination. Those are kind of all things that feel close to me, and that I do, you know, hope to organize around and make some sort of change. Yeah.
That's so sweet, the 12-year-old advocacy letter. That's precious.
It was probably awful.
Oh my God, no, that's
But
so
I was
cute.
a little social worker in the making, apparently.
God. Ophelia, how about you?
Oh, God knows. I mean, it won't shock anybody to hear that transition kind of kickstarted a lot of this stuff for me. I went full-time, I think it was January or February 2016, so slightly more than 5 years now. And, you know, to experience life in the way that I do now, if you have that mind for justice, which I like to think I do, if you've got a passion for, you know, if you want to try and make things better for people around you, I think that you know, gender-based work and work on issues like sexuality, sexual health, and so on is critical. But when you're experiencing it in this many ways firsthand, you kind of can't sit down. For me, a lot of this work kickstarted with my involvement with first the Safe Harbor Outreach Project, and then from there the Women's Center, where I did some work on the planning committee of FemFest. I did a bit of writing for them and so on. And it was a lot of this stuff which it's incredibly enjoyable, and it's as depressing as it can be to deal with you know, tough topics and inequality on a daily basis. It's heartwarming, and it's brilliant to know that there's such a great community behind us. And I think that realizing how many incredible people were doing this kind of work locally was just, it cemented the fact that this was something that I wanted to be at. So here we are.
I just want to remind anybody who's watching, we're gonna probably answer Q&A questions a little bit closer to the end, but if you have questions throughout, feel free to pop them in the chat or the Q&A, and if you want, just like literally just fire them in. It's no big deal. So I'm wondering, and it doesn't matter who starts, whoever feels inspired, but what do you find that you struggle with the most as a 2S LGBTQIA activist? What has been hard, or has it been hard, actually, is a good question too.
I find I would like struggle with this question because I really found myself like oversimplifying it. But I think just like the government as a whole, and like having to live under this like power every day, and the fact that it's not just like a problem that we have to unpack, but it's like so many people aren't even acknowledging that it is a problem, and it's such a deep assumption that it's like it's hard to even have the conversations about it to like tackle. It just seems so big, you know. And that's for like every issue, obviously, like colonialism affects all of the different intersections. Yeah, it's like, I remember like last week, I had the elections ballot for the local election, and I just kind of sat with it for a few days, like so angry that there's no way to like vote out the government. Like I just want the government to be like reduced to a Reddit thread or something. Like I just like, you know.
So systems are difficult.
Yeah, especially opening the sex shop too. It's like there's just so much red tape, and then you know on Instagram it's like you can't advertise or anything. It's just, I feel like I've been just like creeping and crawling around for a while, just trying to be myself, and it's so hard. And you know that's just me, so you can only imagine for other people.
Kim or Ophelia?
I'll jump in.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, it reminds me of being in a class at the university when regardless of what question is asked, it's like there's invariably a gap before somebody jumps in. The nerves never really go away. I think
yeah.
You know, I try to maintain as positive a feeling I can about this, about the work that I do, in spite of everything. It doesn't go with the whole goth aesthetic, but I do my best. And I think it's honestly, in terms of the difficulties, the more constant that your activism becomes, the more pushback you get, which is I don't want to say it's inevitable, but of course it's something we all understand is going to happen. You know, the more visible you are, the more that people, you know, in some cases may choose to target you, may choose to kind of, you know, call you out or ask things very abruptly. I'm thinking back to jobs that I've had in the past, which were comparatively social, where I would get grilled quite aggressively about the need for feminism, for example, on the job by customers. And it's kind of, well, I can't throw you out of my store quite, but, or at least I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. I'm working alone, so I don't necessarily feel too comfortable. The pushback that you get on things like this, it can be quite intense. And I think that just the emotional wear down and the burnout that comes as a consequence of that in some cases, it can be quite difficult to deal with. You'll see, you know, and I think this is part of what's so great about having a great community. We always know that there are people to have our back. And if you need to take a step back in a given moment, as frankly, I kind of have been in the last few months, still recovering from post-election trauma, you know, it's great to know that when you're part of a community as brilliant as this, that there will always be people there who are able to help continue that work.
Yeah.
On a similar note, I think that something that I've struggled with in the past, I actually just saw, I think Ashley noted about talking about like burnout and exhaustion. I think honestly, that's the thing I've seen that, you know, I have struggled with the most, that I see, you know, other people in the community struggling with, is that exhaustion and burnout. I think we have such, I mean, we're a small province. We have a limited number of human resources to draw from. And I find a lot of the same people can often get pulled into this work, and it's just a space that is, you know, very conducive to burnout. So I think something that I'm still trying to learn is, you know, how do I take care of myself? How do I make sure that others in the same space as me are being taken care of? How do we, you know, cultivate this community of care where we're all, you know, able to take care of each other in those ways and be there for each other. And support each other so that we don't feel like all of the work is on us. Because I think, you know, these big, huge issues, whether it be systems of oppression or whiteness, you know, those big topics, it's going to feel like a huge weight on your shoulders. And so something that I think that everybody can kind of get better at is, you know, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we make sure that the work that we're doing is sustainable? I think sustainability certainly is a big thing that a lot of people need to work on, I feel, myself included.
Yeah. I know Ophelia mentioned or references that your activism started through your transition. And I think that for people who have, say, like a visible identity as something that's marginalized, I think that a lot of folks are thrown into activism because they have to. Like, you can't take the hat off. It doesn't, at the end of the day, you don't just stop being who you are. You kind of have to advocate for yourself because you don't get to stop. And I think, Ashley, your question is excellent. And I do want to ask, maybe we'll start with Ophelia, then Kim, then Pepper, but how do you take care and avoid burnout? Because I think that's a really important question. And I'm curious actually how do you handle that? How do you take care?
Really strong antidepressants. And honestly, people said to me multiple times during the last election cycle, so why did you choose to run now? And I would say, Wellbutrin. And it's, well, I tell you, once you find the right cocktail, it's great. I think in my case, I'm really lucky to have an incredible family. I live downtown with my wife and a stepdaughter who are amazing people. And, you know, we're an extremely supportive, close-knit family, and I love them so much. And knowing that I have, you know, great people to come home to at the end of the night. Honestly, the balance, it's been very difficult for me. I still don't feel, I think it's funny that in some ways that maybe you came to me first on this one, just because I really don't know how to make this happen sometimes. You know, it's honestly just a question of, you know, sit there with lots of difficult feelings that I can't fully, you know, deal with. I'm not sleeping and whatever. And you know, and I'm trying to be as realistic as I can here. It's tough. I'm really interested in hearing what Kim and Pepper have to say, because hopefully you all got some tips. It's the sustainability piece. What Kim said is really essential. And I think, again, knowing that community is there, and knowing that however important your work is and whatever you're trying to do, you're not alone. And you know, I think there can be a lot of pressure on us to, you know, take everything on and do all the work and be everything to all things to all people. And no, you know, it's ultimately not workable. You know, we stand together for a reason, and that's a big part of it.
That's really beautiful. Kim?
Yeah, I definitely agree. For me, therapy is a great tool for dealing with the burnout and all those feelings. But similarly, yeah, I think people around me, I just feel like having, you know, chosen family, having really good friends and family who I feel like I can relax with, and, you know, who are also sharing the burden with me. I feel that's really helpful to me. I also had something else in my mind and it just went away. Maybe I'll think of it later. But yeah, relying on other folks to kind of share the burden, and and saying no. Honestly, saying no and not taking on all the work. It's taken a while, I think, to come to a space where I have a better understanding of what my limits are. I think when I first started out in, you know, volunteering and activism, like I kind of first got involved when I was in university. I feel like I took on way too much, and that wasn't going to be sustainable. So I kind of had to learn the hard way, but just learning how to say no, and only you can kind of know that for yourself, and it's going to take time to figure that out, but well worth it.
Nice. Pepper?
Yeah. Well, currently I wouldn't say that I'm like a full-time activist by any means. I feel like my role is probably more just kind of creating a space where either activists can come together, or I can help organize people who can then support activists. Basically, in all my experience, I've kind of been the person who's like there when there's like a call out. I like most of my work has been frontline work, so I'm really happy to like run and get coffees, or like I don't know, take care of people and do that kind of work. And I also love, as much as I hate systems, I love systems, and I spend a lot of time imagining how systems could work better. So I would love to like create something that makes the community, like the supporters in the community, have an easier time navigating those issues. Like I just want everyone who's like ready to come out and fight to be like on, you know, it's like I don't know what that role would be, but so my burnout related to activism isn't so great, but I definitely like have anxiety and whatnot. And in those times I find just like nature and my friends and dancing, like I think as an artist too, I just never really leave work. So sometimes you just need to like get out of the house and go for a walk, like, I don't know. And THC, obviously.
Honesty.
Sing it. Oh, that's funny. So you just mentioned there that you you hate systems, but you love them. I know we all kind of have to live with them. So you said that you wonder what you imagine or what you think that the community might need. And I'm actually wondering from all of your perspectives, maybe we'll go opposite this time, start with Pepper, Ophelia, then Kim. What do you think that the community needs? What resources or community supports are lacking? What is this space? What do we need from your perspective?
For me, like when I think about, you know, if I have this feeling like I just like an urge to do some like activist work, for me, most of it's been done on the West Coast when I was in BC, and that's where a lot of my activist community is. So I kind of just wonder, like, if people want to get interested, it's like where, I guess Quad is a really great resource, but you know, I think a place where people can learn and that knowledge is available and inviting, and like, I don't know, just like a way that community can come together easier and talk about those issues. And then within, yeah, I just like the foundational aspects are kind of what I think need to like be thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ophelia?
No, I think Pepper, what you're touching on is essential. You're right. I mean, you know, the existence of the Quad is a huge step forward for our community, and I'm struck in that, you know, I've lived in 2 other cities in Canada, but this is the only one in which I've you know, in which I've had a real activist praxis. So I don't have a lot to compare it to, unfortunately. I'm aware of organizations in Toronto and in Halifax. Halifax being my hometown, Toronto, where I've lived in the past. And you know, I know that they're doing incredible work, but this is what I've got. I think, you know, to hit the softball here, the Quad needs a physical space. And I'm hoping that someone in the community is generous enough, or that you know, the search is successful. I think to have somewhere that we could physically congregate post-COVID, of course, it would really be remarkable. Beyond that, yeah, just, you know, constant improvements to things like discourse, and openness around a lot of the issues that we're talking about, the more visible and the more normalized things become, the better this community is going to get. I think I've maybe gone at kind of a high level here, but that's what immediately comes to mind.
Yeah, we're good with all levels here. Kim, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, for a long time, I was really yearning for a community space, like a community center. So when I heard about Quad and their mission, I was so excited because I want that physical space where people can be together. Obviously not with COVID, but but yeah, it's so exciting that that's in the works. I think, well, just to kind of speak to like what I've been doing with YWCA and in my role, there's a real lack of services for LGBTQ newcomers to Canada, and also more generally for racialized folks. Like there are really not any specific programs and services for queer racialized folks. And I think that is an area that we are very lacking in this province. I know folks like to think that, this is a very homogenous province. I mean, our community is quite small compared to other places, but we still need those spaces for the most marginalized in our community. And I feel like those who are most marginalized are being left out very often, and it's very sad to see. So I think having specific programs and services around that is what we definitely need more of, because I really think that we are lacking there for sure.
Yeah. What steps do you think that, I mean, it's such a large, complex issue, but I'm wondering, Charlie's asking a question, everybody. I'm wondering what steps do either individuals or groups need to take to access these services or make them happen? What can we do? What can people do? Kim, maybe first, if you have thoughts.
I think representation in like being able to kind of see yourself in the upper levels of organizations, to see yourself represented, having queer racialized folks kind of at the head of a lot of things that we're doing. I think that is a good step forward, or a step forward that folks can take anyway. Yeah, might have to think on that one a little bit. It's hard to kind of pinpoint the exact steps because I feel like there's just so much that we could do.
Yeah, literally. Ophelia, did you have any thoughts you want to add on that one?
I would reiterate a lot of what Kim said. Yeah, I think it's, I think obviously, it may be a cliche to just say representation matters, but it does. And I think, we have a long ways to go with many institutions in this province. I speak from experience, particularly politically, in ensuring that, we understand that, the idea that Newfoundland is a homogenous province is flatly wrong and always has been. This is not, it simply isn't that. And so I think we need to work harder to ensure that our systems of government, our institutions, are run in a way that is far more representative. And yeah, in which power is distributed far more equitably than we have been doing. So those are, these are hard conversations to have in some cases, but we need to be having them. And beyond that, that's essentially what I would add there.
Pepper, did you want to add anything to that?
Can you repeat the question? What was your question?
Yeah, just we're talking about lack of services or what the community needs, but I'm wondering what steps need to be taken, like what from even an individual perspective, maybe from a organizational perspective, what do we need to do to actually start the process of getting these services? What do you think? Right. I mean, I think Purge Shop is a really great, that's a great step in the right direction, that's providing a space. I'm just curious if you wanted to weigh in on this at all.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a lot to add, but I do think that I built a website for Prude, and I've been thinking about how we can build on that so that people can connect and just learn from each other on a more localized level. There's so much information on the internet, but when it comes down to the actual services that are here and what we can access, there's a lot of barriers. There's not a lot of mental health services that are easy to access, or they're really expensive. And one of these questions I kind of asked my Instagram followers, because I didn't feel like I had a ton to add to them. And just because I've navigated the healthcare system, as I'm just jumping to another question now, but
that's good.
As a cis white woman. So I was like, let's see what other people have to say. And like one person said that there's only 2 clinics that serve trans people in the whole province, and the rest are just word of mouth. So it's like, if we can somehow get those word of mouth conversations to transfer somewhere else where it makes that information more accessible, then that might help.
Yeah, totally.
Well said.
Yeah,
That's,
I think that, sorry, you go. No, you go.
This is painfully Canadian. The barriers to accessing trans healthcare, you know, that was an experience that I had very directly a number of years ago when I first tried to start a course of hormones, where it's kind of, you know, you get bounced back and forth. And this was, I think 215 had not opened at the time, and the only person who was understood to be I don't want to say specialist in, but experienced in trans care was Maureen Gibbons, who's still my doctor, and was wonderful. And, you know, it was kind of to get shuffled around between institutions and have phone calls made and be told that, oh, there's something so unusual of what you're looking for and whatever. It's kind of, I think the more education that we have, and, you know, the greater that education is, the more levels that takes place at. The minute that you hit a barrier like that, you know, I was willing to soldier through that. I had the spoons to do it, but not everybody necessarily would. The more open we can be about things, the more educated that people within these institutions can be about things, the less shuffling around we're going to get, and ultimately the better results we deliver. And I want to thank Ashley in the comments for, you know, that for pointing this out. The barriers to access in general, the more we do to strip those down, the better. This is usually the point when I'd start advocating for UBI, but we'll save that for later.
Funny. I want to come back to what we said about Quadrangle getting a center and just unpack a little bit about why that's historically significant and super important and really something to celebrate for the community. Really quick, I just want to say that for 2S LGBTQIA folks, we don't have spaces, in Newfoundland, we don't have a space that we can go that's safe, that isn't fueled by alcohol, that isn't you know, that isn't a private, you know, pushed aside, like quiet corner of the province that is safe for people to gather and for people to access that information and to access care and to have community. And I think that, you know, in other provinces, there are community centers and they're wonderful. But for us, because we don't have one, we have one bar, maybe. I think there might be just one bar right now. I don't know. But either way, I'm just saying
there was another one that lasted a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we have a very limited access to places where we can actually gather safely that are for us. And I think that if anybody's listening, if anybody ever watches this and you have a pot of money in your pocket that you're willing to donate to somewhere, that is a really valuable cause because it is essential care. Thanks, Charlie, to have a space where people can be safe. That isn't just for alcohol and because that's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to be in that space because that has its own set of harms and its own set of risks. But if there was a space that was a community hub where we could share sober spaces, yes, where we could share information, I think it'd be perfect. I don't know. I am so happy and I'm so thrilled that Quadrangle is taking up that space because I think it's desperately, desperately needed.
I have a little anecdote to add on that, sure, if folks are interested.
Yes.
Yeah, I just kind of on the importance of having a physical space and getting to meet people. Before I had started Quiver Club and Ace Space, I had never met another asexual person before. Like before I had like gone to university and been a volunteer at intersections at MUN, I'd never met another asexual person. And for me, it was so hard to not see myself anywhere and to not know where my people were. It was really hard. And so like finally having that space where I can meet people like me, it was absolutely life-changing. And I want that for everybody. And I feel like everybody deserves to have that space. So physical spaces are so important and ones that people feel safe in and comfortable. Yeah, so important. So excited for Quad.
Same, literally same. I just want to come to a comment in the chat there from Holly. I'm going to come back to it, said that med students definitely need more hands-on training in queer and trans healthcare. They barely get any training right now, and the training that is offered is elective, which is true, and a really big disservice to our community. I think it's, yeah, Holly, I'm with you. It's really frustrating. So I want to know from the panelists, why do you feel that the 2S LGBTQI community is underserved or underrepresented? Why do you think that happens? Why is there that gap or that large lack in service Maybe we'll start with Kim, Ophelia, then Pepper.
Sure. I think, kind of to speak what Holly said in the chat, I think there's a really big gap of knowledge, particularly for those in healthcare. And to speak to my own experiences, like, you know, I live with depression and anxiety, and the journey of trying to find, you know, mental health care providers who are understanding of that, there's such a huge gap. I remember going to, you know, the Monk Counseling Center and saying like, hey, I just came out as asexual and this is a great thing that's happening in my life, and it being completely flipped and turned around as like, you know, is something wrong? You know, is this like the reason you're feeling X, Y, and Z negative things? And it's like, people don't understand. I think there's just a really huge gap in knowledge, and I think that's why I feel that we're underserved in mental health care in particular. I'm sure there's tons of other reasons for all sorts of other ways that we're underserved, but that's something that comes to mind is definitely in mental health care in particular. There's just that a really big lack of knowledge.
Ophelia?
Sure. I mean, no, I mean, and Kimberly, I'm really sorry to hear that that was your experience with the counseling center. Unfortunately, I've had experiences with institutions, including that one, which weren't far off that. You know, knowledge is a big deal. I think that, you know, I tend to look at things discursively. I think the more we've been talking about normalization and representation a lot throughout this, and I think the fact that bureaucracy at an institutional level in so many cases has, you know, prevented us from doing the real work, that we've had a lot of things that have gotten kicked down the road. We've had a lot of conversations that, you know, oh, that everything has to, there's this process. Even to look at something as simple as the evaluations for gender confirmation surgery, which are now being done in the province, but which weren't until something like the last year. I think, you know, trans folks in the province are being flown to Toronto to have evaluations done at at an institution there, and that I think is kind of, you know, it's representative of the fact that when you neglect these things, you know, the ripple effect can be quite massive. You know, I think the more that we expand our knowledge base, and the more and the better representation that we have, the better this is going to get.
Yeah. Pepper?
Yeah. So I think a lot has to do also with like a better sex education, starting with youth, but also for adults. It's like so many people didn't grow up with that, and I think it would be obviously amazing to like make sex education, and not even just about sexuality, but about gender, encompassing everything, but also somehow to like educate, like re-educate adults, because heteronormativity is like so ingrained and it just affects everything, and so many people are erased by default. And it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier. It's like there's this problem, and not only do we have to fix the problem, but we have to like make everyone realize that there is a problem. And I think, yeah, just way more education, public education. I don't know how to do that, but
Totally. The AIDS community. I don't know if this resource is still available online, but I really love it. It's a resource the AIDS Committee of Newfoundland and Labrador put out. It's called Sex Over 50, and it's quite literally like a sexual health pamphlet for for anyone over 50. And I actually read through it, even though I'm like 28, but I read through it anyway because I was very curious. And I actually was so surprised by some of the things that showed up in there. But it was a really, really wonderful pamphlet. Charlie, yeah, it might be. I just haven't. I tried to find it online and couldn't. Anyway, it's a wonderful resource. So maybe if you want to look that up and send it to your aging friends.
Yeah, we will get put in the shop.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. Maybe we'll start with Pepper this time, and then Ophelia, then Kim. I'm wondering what makes you most proud about your activism, or what did you get involved with that made you, I don't know, that made you feel joy? What is something that has given you life back in your activism?
So last year at this time, I guess February, March, I actually happened to be in Victoria, BC, on the Lgbtqia territory during Shutdown Canada. So I I think what I'm probably most proud of is that the fact that I learned that I have a lot of stamina for frontline action, and that's really kind of where all of my like fire is. And it was so amazing. It was like weeks that it was going on, that all these people were like sleeping outside this building together. And I'm not from Victoria or anything, but a lot of people there were sharing their sentiments of how like they've never experienced a community like this. Like it was this really amazing, so well organized, really impressive, you know, not protest, but defense, land defense action. And I think if people experienced that, the joy that comes along with, like, it was very hard and challenging, and like a lot of the times, but so powerful. There's so much joy that comes out of that, and it really makes you realize how strong like a couple of people could be, you know, relative to how big our population is. Like that was very effective. And it's, I don't know, we were all like crying when it was over, because it was just I don't know, really moving and really powerful. So yeah, I think about that a lot.
Wow. Very cool. Ophelia?
I could actually use a second to formulate. Kim, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I think the thing that I just always feel the most proud of is, you know, co-founding Quiver Club and A Space. That's kind of like a space that I feel so comfortable in, and I feel like has gotten a good amount of reach. And I just really hope that I have been able to give a similar space that I needed back when I was first kind of coming to terms with my sexuality. So I feel like that's probably what I'm most proud of. Yeah. I also think of, but before I started my work with YWCA, I was like a frontline social worker with Eastern Health, and as difficult as that work was, and as difficult as it was navigating so many barriers, I feel like I am proud of a lot of the cases I was able to advocate for, just on that individual level as well. Yeah.
Okay, I think I might have frozen up there for a second. My tech is just awful. Look, I'm barely over CDs. Okay, this is good. That's direct record. This is just a, you know, cover the gaps with jokes. There's a lot of work that I could point to that has had this kind of impact. But I think in terms of you know, moments of pride or moments of satisfaction, a lot of them have actually been interpersonal, and it's kind of, in many cases, it's kind of random, but whether this is, you know, you've got a job in a particular institution, or you're visible as a member of a specific community, and folks are able to identify you and come up to you and say that you've done, you know, that a piece of work that you and the people around you have done have made it safer for them to be who they are, is really reassuring that you know, that this is all worth it. Yeah, it's, I have some cynical things I could say, but I won't. But it's yeah, honestly, it's the number of connections that I've been able to make with so many wonderful people, both on the activist side and you know, in the community side. Just knowing that the work that we're doing is making this place safer in the way that, you know, maybe I wanted to see it safer when I moved here 13 years ago. And, you know, seeing the improvements that we're getting every few months, every year, it's just really heartwarming. And it's enough, we talked about burnout, it's enough to, in some cases, kind of push you through that. That's, yeah, I'll stop there.
Awesome. We are coming close to the end, so I don't know, maybe Charlie and Yohei, if you want to come back. If anybody in the chat has questions, feel free to pop them in. Yeah, I want to thank you all, though, for all of your wonderful, wonderful thoughts. Yeah, that was really lovely.
It's been a really good talk, and I'm glad that we've been able to talk about stuff like burnout and what physical space is, because currently with my job working with Quad, it's nice to hear, but also really odd to try to answer when a reporter asks, you know, like, why the physical space? Why is that a need or a requirement? And there are times where I have to bite my tongue, because it's like, you know, when you think about something about like physical space, it is the sense of like a physical entity being out in the world that you know that it's for you, that if you need to walk in, you can go into it. If you need support, it's there. And I always find it interesting because people who might not have a struggle or might not have that disconnect or that feeling like they already know who they are and they know their community and they don't need that extra like little piece to kind of give them that solid foundation. They don't understand the need of a physical space. They don't understand the connection. And I think that speaks volumes to the way that our system is built, where it's working as designed for those people it was designed by and for. And it's still very much a broken system. But when people call it a broken system, I always look at it being like, no, it's built exactly the way it's supposed to be, and it's functioning the way it's supposed to be for those who are benefiting from it. And that question, every single time when someone asks like why the physical space, really kind of cements the idea in my head that, much like we've talked about before, it's systematically an issue for us not to have a space, like us not having somewhere to be. I know, Kimberly, you mentioned your group that you co-founded, having something like that inside the center. Same thing with, I'm part of PFLAG, having that inside the center, having trans support with their networks and stuff inside a center. It would become a one-stop shop, right? Like the idea of having something that you can go in and you can find that piece that you're missing, or that piece that you know you have, but you want to connect with others. I know we talked about in some of the chats and even in the comments around training, that there's a gap in training for medical students or nurses, or just general people understanding, like those things could be existing inside a center, right? Like we could have med students coming and doing stuff in our space so that they're learning from individuals and getting that experience. We could be talking more with Memorial and doing more of those pieces together in collaboration. We also want to look at the fact of having a space is great for if you want someone to rent for, say, a session, just like for someone to come in and talk to, so that it's a one-on-one, like a counselor, so that they're not having to go find someone, that it's just in one space. This idea that we're so disjointed has been something that I've dealt with since moving here 12 years ago as well, where I came from Halifax. I knew certain networks, but it's almost like because we don't have a space, so many individual things are happening because it's trying to fill the need and fill those gaps. And they're doing great work, but those who need them are still having a really hard time finding them, right? Like they could still exist, but actually physically finding them is so hard. So I'm really glad that we ended our conversation with the series around activism and advocacy, because many people in our community take on so much of that themselves, feeling like they have to, right? Like feeling like if they don't do it, no one's going to do it. Or if they don't continuing it to do it, it's going to disappear. And someone else that really needed it, like they did, will go needing, right? So it's that concept of fear of if something stopped, would someone else that really needed that support like you did 2-4 years ago won't have it, and what kind of struggle will they have to do as well? So it's really nice for us to have these conversations around why as a community we do what we do.
Yep.
I mean, if I could pop in here for a second, if that's okay. There's the historical component to this too. I mean, anytime there's been an equity movement that is desired physical space in this province and of course elsewhere, very frequently there is often a tremendous amount of pushback. There's a wonderful Lynn Keeley has an edited volume called "Pursuing Equality" about the movement for gender equity in Newfoundland, and there's an article in there. Sharon Gray Pope, I think, is the author, who where there's a description of the way that of the struggles that women's centers and status of women councils and so on, the struggles that they had beginning in the 60s and 70s to find physical spaces for their institutions in this province. There is precedent for this. There's pushback against it for a reason, because, Charlie, as you say, when the system is functioning as described, this is the idea that people can congregate and stand together in a very efficacious way. It can be a pretty radical change. And I think there are people who have a vested interest in that not happening, which is pretty telling. So I really, really hope that we can get to that point soon with the Quad. The amount of good that could do for this community is unspeakable.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought up the idea around those other groups, like the Status of Women's Centers, because the fact Quad is not supposed to be just for St. John's. It is very much a provincial in scope, and we plan in our business model to have quad pods, much like other groups where, you know, like in Labrador or Gander, or, you know, where I'm hearing discussions from people in Marystown, which is like, you know, they are the hub for the surrounding areas, and there's not a whole lot of resources out there. And it's heartbreaking because that's like, what, 4 hours away? Like, it's not like a crazy distance. So, you know, the idea of having things like quad pods that would be, you know, funded to have someone paid or give more money to an organization that is currently doing something so they can take a part-timer and turn them into a full-time person and still have like the sharing of resources and the sharing of a network, because we have a wonderful, wonderful group when it comes to our community. We have a huge web, a huge network. The only problem is we have nowhere for all that resources to funnel through. So it is going through word of mouth, like all of it. So when we have someone, you know, it's hard to say and it's sad to say, but if someone passes away or someone moves or someone gets burnt out or someone decides to be like, you know, I disconnect from the community, we lose huge champions who do so much work. We lose resources, we lose history, we lose our momentum. When it comes to Quad in general, like Quad has been going on for over 10 years, trying to do small pieces, and people have come and gone when they can and give the efforts when they can or be on the board when they could. But it's the fact of like, it's been standing the test of time because people aren't unwilling to let it go. And it's at that point where we need support, you know, provincially. We need that support through businesses. We need that support through organizations to really just say enough's enough. And like, we need the space. We need core funding. We need regular programming. We need people to be employed for doing that work that they're doing for free and if they're doing it for years. We need things like libraries. We need archives specifically for us. Like, I love the fact that we have Prue now as like a business, because it's one of those other things. Like we should have been having more queer and trans friendly sex stores and places for literature ages ago, right? Like it's all of these pieces we should have had because people have wanted it. There's been the need and the thirst there for it, but the infrastructure is always constantly against us. So I really commemorate anyone who takes on doing a peer support group or a business that is queer and trans and two-spirit focused, because it's one of those things that will literally be thanked by the community. But I know that that's like a lot of personal work and personal struggle to make sure that they're maintained and moving. But with that, yeah, with that said, though, we are at the end of our 1 hour. So I would just like to thank all of our speakers. You are phenomenal individuals. Thank you so much for coming and speaking, but also thank you for all of your energy, your time outside of this webinar that you do for the community. I'd love to thank our ASL interpreters. It's so great to have you here throughout this entire webinar series. We really love the fact that we've been able to make these spaces as accessible as possible. And we hope to do more things with you know, making them as accessible as possible. Thank you to Isabella. I hope they're still here. They might be gone. If you are still here, please, you can come back on screen if you want. Hey. So thank you so much for coming back and doing another lovely land acknowledgement. It's really great to see you. Sorry that you can't see me. But other than that, and thank you everyone who came and listened and stayed up to the end. This is our last one. So as everyone said already, it's really sad to see it end, but it's awesome. And they're all on our website as soon as they're released. So this one should be getting released, hopefully I think either next Tuesday or the following Tuesday. And then they're all gonna be on our website for whoever wants to see them whenever.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.